thorough and efficient clause is the basis of Abbott.
Right.
So you got to change that language. In order to change that language,
Thorough and efficient?
Thorough and efficient.
You have to take that out?
You don't necessarily have to take it out, but you're going to have to really define
What thorough and efficient?
what a thorough and efficient is and what impact all of that would have on distribution of funding.
You mean specific? Because it's very vague.
Well, look, right now, we have a constitutional amendment that goes back to the Byrne days, and it says that all of the money that is collected in the income tax, all of it, has to be used to reduce property taxes. You aware of that? Every last nickel.
That's what's in
the Constitution now.
Constitution.
In order to get that passed, Byrne agreed to put in the Constitution that every nickel has to be used for income tax. Well, it doesn't address how you distribute that money to relieve income taxes. And so the court has ordered the distribution of income tax money in a way that's heavily weighted toward certain districts that have low tax resources. What that constitutional amendment would have to say is that every dollar raised in the income tax has to be returned on an equal basis to every single community in the state based on the number of children it has, without regard for any other consideration.
This is what it should say.
Well, if you really want to correct the property tax problem, that's what it should say. If that happened, you understand something. The Abbott districts have 22% of the children in the state, but they get 58% of the income tax money. So the property taxes in the urban areas are nil. And essentially because the state is not returning an equal amount per child to the suburbs then have to tax themselves, raise their own property taxes to raise the money they need to run their schools.
Well, isn't the purpose for taxing to help the poor?
The purpose of taxing is to help, that's a philosophy, that's not a purpose of taxing.
Well, what is the necessity to help the poor?
Here's my problem with it, Herb. We have now, in the 35 years since the introduction of Abbott or its predecessor, Abbott v. Burke, that was the first, 1975 was the original Supreme Court decision that put into effect that said the state had an obligation to see that every child received a thorough and efficient education, and that the children who weren't receiving it were having their constitutional rights denied to them. Okay, and that was the basis upon which the court said, therefore, the reason that they're not getting a thorough and efficient education is that they're not getting enough money. The court defined the absence of money as an educational problem. We now know 35 years later that that's not true. That money alone, absent other reforms, will not change anything in the Abbott districts, because we have now spent $30 billion or more in the Abbott district since 1975. And I have seen nothing move, nothing. Not test scores, not graduation rates, nothing. It tells us after 35 years that we're doing something wrong.
Well, it does tell us that after 35 years, compensation has increased better than the kinds of conditions for educating kids.
Well, that's one thing it does say, yes, because we have, in those 35 years, per pupil spending adjusted for inflation. You have to do that to be fair. Adjusted for inflation, per pupil spending has more than doubled, and there's been absolutely no movement in any academic outcomes. Now, if money made a difference and I gave you twice as much money, I should see after 35 years something happening, right? Nothing's happening. Now, you can stand there and argue all you want that taking money away from these districts is unfair to poor children. What's unfair to poor children is they're not getting an education. The money is not going to the children. When I say that $25,000, $28,000 a year is going into Newark per pupil, it doesn't mean that $28,000 is being handed to a student and said, here, get your education. That's school choice. That's why I'm an advocate of school choice. I'm not an advocate of reducing funding for low-income areas. I'm an advocate for moving control of that funding from the system to the parent. And if the system isn't working, as far as the parent's concerned, they should be free to take that money and go elsewhere.